Okay, good evening and
Good
welcome back
evening,
to the
ma'am.
class. Yes, we'll quickly finish the questions and go to the ethics. So we were on the fifth question. Did we do the sixth one? No, right? No. Okay, sixth one. Who will read? Raina, can you read the sixth question? The review questions on page 42.
Sixth question.
Yes. You already finished five.
Okay.
Okay.
Discuss the strengths and weakness of an experiment method
Method
as
of
the method inquiry.
Yes. Do you know the answer? The advantages and disadvantages of experimental method.
Um,
Refer the lecture note or the other notes. First, see. Yes.
Variable that may be obtained by measurement of subject uh, that can be not assignable.
Then,
Situational environment variable operating at the time of conducting the experiment, nor the temperature.
situational factors. Yes.
Uh,
Then,
um, can be easily combined with
with the other ones.
other ones, and the rest all are not clear, ma'am, because I wrote
Okay,
speed.
okay. I have clearly given that in the notes, I suppose. Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
So learn from that. They are just direct answers, so you can learn from the notes. Now, next is an application level question. Who will read? Ashish, can you read? Seventh one. Read. Unmute, unmute. Ashish, unmute. Unmute and read the question. I'll help you to answer. Just read the question loudly.
Dr.
Dr. Krishnan.
Krishna is going to observe and record children's playing behavior of a nursery school without attempting to influence or control the behavior. Which
Yes.
method of research is involved? Explain the process and discuss its
The merits and demerits. Okay. So Dr. Krishna is going to observe and record children's play behavior. So it is clear that it will be one form of what method?
Observational method.
Observational method. Yes. So Ashish, if the Dr. Krishnan is the researcher here. He is the observer here. Is he participating with the children in the play, or is he observing them from a distance? What did you understand?
participating.
Is he playing with the children, or is he
Participating in the
observing them
children.
from a distance? Yes? Yes? Observing? Yes, you're muted again. Do you know, or are you confused? Yes?
Observing children.
Observing from a distance, is it? Is that what you're telling me? Yes? Yes, yes. So Dr. Krishnan is not attempting to influence or control the behavior. He is not planning to disturb the children's play in any way. He is just observing them from a distance. Okay. So that would become what type of observation? Participant or non-participant observation?
Non-participant.
Non-participant observation, because Dr. Krishnan is not playing along with them. He is just standing there and observing. So he is not participating in the children's play. So that becomes non-participant observation. So we have finished one part of the question. The method of research involved here is non-participant observation. Now, explain the process and discuss its merits and demerits. We have already studied a lot about non-participant observation. How is it done? And the positives and negatives. Yes, we already have that in our textbook and notes. So that's also a direct question. You can answer from the notes. Now the next question is, give 2 examples of the situations where survey method can be used. What are the limitations of this method? We already discussed that while we started studying survey. They are conducted to know people's attitude on family planning, on literacy rates, then the attitudes towards marriage, then you all told me about the census method, collecting the census of population survey. All those things are dealt with. You can write any 2 examples. Then what are the limitations of this method? I hope you can write the limitations of survey method directly. Yes. Then differentiate between an interview and a questionnaire. We have different points for that. I'll send you a picture in the WhatsApp group today, and you can learn from that if you want also. Okay. Then we have the characteristics of a standardized test. So note that characteristics are the reliability, validity, and norms. Those 3 factors. Okay, characteristics of a standardized test. It should be reliable, it should be valid, and it should have appropriate norms. You have to write that answer for this question, for that question. Reliability, validity, and norms. You have to explain that. That is question number 10. Then we have describe the limitations of psychological inquiry. We just learnt about it now in last class, about the limitations of psychological inquiry. How many limitations did we learn, Meghna?
4.
Which were they?
Conceptualizing a problem.
Limitations.
I think
Today we learned about it. Check your lecture notes.
Lack of true 0 point.
Yes.
Relative nature of psychological tools.
Yes. And one
and
more.
Subjective interpretation of quantitative data.
Okay, those are the limitations you have to write. You have to point out those 3 points, and then you have to explain about each of them according to the marks. Okay, if it is a 1 mark or if it is a 2 mark question, then you just write down what the limitations are, just the 3 points. Okay. Then we have what are the ethical guidelines that a psychologist needs to follow while conducting a psychological inquiry. To answer that, we have to learn the last and final portion of the chapter, that is ethical issues. Can you see the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, okay. So this is the last and final topic that we'll be dealing with in the chapter. So research is almost done. You all are set to be good researchers from now on after this. I mean, you need the ethics to conduct the research. After studying the ethics, you can become good researchers, I hope. Okay, ethical issues. Ethical issues are beginning with what are ethics. Ethics means dealing with the moral principles that we hold. That is what is right and what is wrong in whichever field we work. That is the ethics of that field. Now we have different ethical issues when we conduct a research, and we'll see what they are. The issues, not issues as such, we deal with the ethical principles that have to be followed while doing a research. These are the main principles. They are respect for person's privacy. So there are participants, so many number of participants in our study. and we have to respect their privacy. Their personal information should be protected. Okay, they shouldn't be harmed in any other way with their personal information. That is one thing. Then choice to participate in the study. We shouldn't force them, or we should give them a choice to either participate or not. So that is another factor. Then comes beneficence, or protecting the participants in the study from any harm. Beneficence means they should benefit in some way. That means they shouldn't be harmed. That indirectly means that they shouldn't be harmed in any way. That is beneficence. Now, justice, or sharing the benefits of research with all the participants. So there should be a justice maintained all throughout the study, and whatever benefits are there for the particular research, it should be shared among all the participants of the study. Understood? And the research that we do, the results that we get, those results are also a piece of information, a piece of new information to the field, right? So that itself is a benefit for the scientific community. So that should be shared among all the people, all the participants. That is the fourth principle. Now, apart from these principles, there are certain aspects of these four principles. Those certain aspects are the most important ones that we are going to learn. That is, some important aspects of these particular ethical principles. The first one is voluntary participation. Voluntary participation means, so here in we have 5 points. They are the technical terms that we use in research. When we deal with ethics, we have certain terms like debriefing, we have voluntary participation, informed consent. All those are new terms for you, right? These are the technical terms based on the earlier said principles. And these as such are also called principles, ethical principles also. So if I ask you to explain the ethical principles to be followed, you have to write these 5 points. Don't write the other 4. Okay. As if it is a 6-mark question, you can write this in the introduction, but make sure that you write the points that I'm going to teach now, the ethical principles. Okay. The first one is voluntary participation. Voluntary means by one's own will. So the participation that the participants give should be based on their own will. We shouldn't force them to participate in this particular study. That is what voluntary participation means. So it states that the persons on whom you want to conduct the study should have the choice to decide whether to participate in the study or not. Participants should have the freedom to decide about their participation without any coercion. Coercion or excessive inducement means forceful behavior. We shouldn't force them. And the freedom to withdraw from the research without, excuse me, without penalty once it has begun. So they have the right to choose if they want to take part in the study or not. And also they have the right to leave whenever they want. Even if the study is has almost reached its conclusion, they can leave at that particular point if they don't feel comfortable. Okay, that is voluntary participation. Voluntary participation means we shouldn't force the participants to take part in the study. Rather, they have to come for the study by their own choice. We don't blackmail them, or we don't brainwash them to take part in the study. We explain about the research, and then if they are interested, they can come and participate in the study. We shouldn't use any forceful means to get the participants to engage in the study. That is voluntary participation. Then informed consent. Informed consent means taking permission. Informed consent means we have to inform them about the research, about the whole process of the research, and then we get a consent from them. Usually it is a written consent. We'll write that I am willing to participate in the study, and we get the signature and name of the participant. That is how we usually get written consent. Like before in hospitals, before doing some operations or something like that, the patient's bystander has to sign a consent form, right? That the hospital is not responsible for anything that happens to the patient. Similarly, we have to inform the participant about all the processes that are going to take place during the research, and then they have to decide if they give permission to participate or not. So that is informed consent. Usually it is taken in written form, and this principle states that the participants should be informed about the process of the study before data from them are collected, so that they make an informed decision about participation in the study. So they can decide after this information, after getting information, they can decide if they want to participate or not. Okay, and then they give the consent. If they are willing to participate, they give this informed consent to the researcher that I am willing to participate. Otherwise, they tell I'm not interested, so I'm not coming for the study. For example, in some studies, the participants are given harmful or unpleasant stimuli like shocks, like electric shocks, or are asked to provide personal or private information, or deception, that is false feedback. Deception means we give false feedback to them, or we give any false information to them. Like I told you, if the research is based on something, then the researcher sometimes might hide his or her identity, and then take part in the participant observation or non-participant observation and such things. So there also deception takes place. They are giving false information, right? And false feedback, it can be in the sense of intelligence test is being done, then we give they have got an average score, but we tell them that they have got a high average score or above average score, then that will be a false feedback. So such things might happen during a research. Then they'll have to experience electric shocks or any other harmful stimuli during the research. So all these factors have to be earlier told to them, or earlier informed to them. And then only if they consent or if they allow, if they permit for the study, then we can include them in the study. So in all these situations, informed consent is important. So the first one was voluntary participation. The second one was informed consent. Now the third one is debriefing. Once the study is over, the participants are provided with necessary information to complete their understanding of research. After this, after the research has taken place, after the data is being collected, what the researchers do is they debrief. If I ask you to give an answer, brief about something, then you give a description about that particular thing, right? Debriefing is similar to that. What you do is you explain what happened in the research, and if this deception thing has already happened, like if the false feedback is given, or if they have hided their identity, I mean the researcher has hided their identity, if such things has happened, if deception has occurred, then in debriefing stage what we do is we reveal our identity. We inform them that you have been given a false feedback earlier. It was for this particular purpose. It won't cause you any harm. You have to ensure them that they won't be harmed in any other way. Okay, you have to brief about the whole process, whole research process, about the results also. Okay, so that happens in debriefing. This is particularly important if deception has been used in the study. Debriefing ensures that participants leave the study in the same physical and mental state as when they entered. It should offer reassurance to the participants. The researcher should make efforts to remove any anxiety or other adverse effects that participants may have felt as a result of being deceived in the course of the study. So if deception has occurred, then the researcher has to explain that deception has occurred. You have been given false information about something, or you have been given false feedback about something, or you have been, the researcher has been hiding something from you. You have to open up all those topics to them. And if they are still anxious about what will be my future, what will happen to me, I already gave so many personal information, I shared so many personal information with this person whom I thought that will be somebody else with some other identity. So some participants might have such anxious feelings or any other effects, any other emotional problems also. So the researcher has to take care of that also. If required, they have to provide counseling or some other things like that in order to give them reassurance that they will be all fine. Your personal information won't be shared, or you will be fine after the research. This information won't be used for any other purposes. All those things are ensured to them during debriefing. Understood? Okay. Now the next one is sharing the results of the study. So usually it is said that whichever research you conduct, you have to share the results of the study or the findings of the study to the participants. That is the right ethical behavior. But in most of the studies, it's not so much applicable or so much possible or practical. But talking in the ethical terms, this is the right way to do. Whatever study we do, we have to share those results with the participants. Okay. Here, in psychological research, after collecting information from the participants, we come back to our place of work, analyze the data, and draw conclusions. It is obligatory for the researcher to go back to the participants and share the results of the study with them. When you go for data collection, the participants develop certain expectations from you. One of the expectations is that you will tell them about their behavior that you have investigated in the study. As a researcher, it is our moral duty to go back to the participant. So suppose if you are involved in the study and you are being tested based on your anxiety level, based on your intelligence, based on your depression, and many other factors. So you would be expecting the researcher to tell you the results, right? You would want to know your IQ level. You would want to know how anxious you are. You would want to know if you're suffering from depression or not. At least you'll be a little bit curious to know all those factors, right? So similarly, all the participants who come for the study would be curious or would expect the researcher to give them the results. So what they should do, or what they ought to do is they have to go back to the participants and share the results. Okay, that is the ethically right behavior of the researcher. And this exercise has two advantages. One, you fulfill the expectations of the participants. Second, the participant may tell you the opinion about the results, which sometimes may, this is not clear, which sometimes may tell you their opinion about the results, which sometimes may help you develop new insights. So one part is the participant's wish of knowing the result is fulfilled. They already wanted to know, they already expected the researcher to convey the results of the study to them. So that wish is fulfilled. And the second part is these participants themselves might give us some more information based on the results. So that is a plus point. That is a bonus for our research. Yes, those are the two advantages of sharing the results. So we saw voluntary participation, then we saw informed consent, then we saw debriefing, then we saw sharing the results of the study. Now the last one is confidentiality of data source. Write down confidentiality of data source. Ashish, are you there? I can't see you. Okay, confidentiality of data source. Have you heard about the word confidentiality? Confidential, highly confidential information. Have you heard? No? Yes? Who has heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Who? Aishwarya, is it you? Yes. What do you know about confidentiality?
Like I've seen some kind of posters or something, I guess.
Yeah, about what? You don't remember? Okay. In like films like where this information, investigations and the crime scenes and such things happen, you might have seen police officers or high authorities sharing some files, and they tell this should not be shared with anybody else. This is highly confidential. Have you heard that? Most of the crime thrillers, there might be some or the other dialogue with this confidentiality. So, what confidentiality means is, or what confidential, the term confidential means is, in common terms, we can tell it is a top secret. In common terms, to understand, we can tell that confidentiality means we have to keep the information as a top secret. Similarly, in research, we collect so much of information from the particular participant, the name, their residence, their age, their family structure, their this, their that, their vulnerabilities, their weaknesses, their strengths. We might measure so many things, so many personal information from them. And this information should not be shared with anybody else. And it should not be used for any other purpose other than the research. And one thing that we have to notice in most of the studies, we don't try to collect their names. Instead, what we do is we give codes for them. Suppose if Meghna, what is your full name?
VM Meghna.
VM Meghna. So if it is VM Meghna, if Meghna is a participant, then we give the code VMM. Or we just give a number. Say if Meghna is the 5th participant who is undergoing the study, then we give the number 5 as a code. And so that if some other person by mistake or by their own convenience read the report of Meghna, then they can't relate that this is this particular person. They can't identify from this that this is Meghna who is studying psychology in class 11C. Understood? That is one way we can make things confidential. We can ensure more confidentiality. Okay, we'll see what confidentiality is now. The participants in a study have the right to privacy. The researcher must safeguard their privacy by keeping the information provided by them in strict confidence. The information should only be used for research purposes, and in no circumstances it should be passed on to the interested parties. So many people, they would be interested to know what this person, like suppose I am an outsider and some researcher has come to study the students of class 11C. And I am interested to know how the psychology students performed in the study. Just imagine like that. So I might try to bribe this person and give me that information. But if he is an ethical person, if he is a researcher who follows the ethical principles, then he should not pass on that information. He should not pass on any kind of information to me. Understood? That is how we ensure confidentiality. Not only in research, if you are becoming a clinical psychologist in the future or a doctor or whoever that may be, we have certain ethical principles in different fields. And in regarding the clinical psychologist or a counselor, if a patient comes to us, then the information that the patient shares or the client shares with us should be strictly confidential. We should not, if I consider myself, if I become a clinical psychologist and the patient comes, then I'm not even allowed to share this information with my husband or my kids. Understood? Not even to my father, not even to my mother, not even to my sister, not even to anybody else other than myself. But we can discuss the case with the fellow clinical psychologists so that more treatment methods can be given to them. That can be done. But we cannot share this information, or we cannot go for a party and discuss this as a joke in front of them. We cannot discuss the case, oh, I had a patient there, he was this, he was that. I cannot give information about him or her. Okay, I can discuss the case situation, the disorder that the person is having for the general information of the people. But I cannot tell that this person staying at this particular street of this particular place, staying in the white painted house with the two-storied building, who works in that particular company, who has these many kids and this wife working here. I cannot share all this information with anybody else. Okay, means I have to follow strict confidentiality there also. Not only in research, in clinical practice also, the psychologists follow this. Yes, the most effective way of protecting the confidentiality of the participants is not to record their identities. That's where I told you about the name codes. This is, however, not possible in certain kinds of research. In such cases, code numbers are given on the data sheet and the names with the codes are kept separately. The identification list should be destroyed as soon as the research is over. So what I do is, I told you about Meghna's case. We write it as BMM. But I have to know if Meghna has forgot to mark an answer, then I have to contact her again for that answer, right? So for that purpose, I have to maintain another list that VMM, the code VMM means Meghna. And once the research is over, I have to destroy that particular identification list. Understood? So that is about confidentiality of data source. Now, we just do a quick revision, that is ethical issues. There are several ethical issues arising when we conduct a research, and generally there are these principles that has to be followed. But the most important aspects of these principles, the 5 factors that we saw now, those are derived from these 4 principles. Okay, these 4 principles are general things that we have to know. And from these general terms, we have taken specifically 5 things. Those 5 things are the main ethical principles that has to be followed. That is voluntary participation. That is, they have to participate with their own will. We shouldn't force them. Then informed consent. They need to know what they are up to, what we are up to, and we need to get a consent from them. Then we have debriefing. Debriefing means we have to brief them about the full research, and also if deception has taken place, we have to brief them that too. We have to inform them that too. Now the next one is sharing the results of the study. That is, we have already collected the data, we have analyzed, and we have the results in our hands. We have to share them with the participant. There are 2 advantages for that. One is the participants' wish of knowing, and they already have certain expectations about getting the results. So that will be fulfilled, as well as we might get more information from the participants. And the last one was confidentiality of data source, which means we should not share all our information, all the participants' information with anybody else. One way to ensure it is through using identity codes. They shouldn't be able to, nobody should be able to identify them based on their names and other information. Rather, we can give them certain numerical codes or alphabetical codes to identify them. If we are keeping a identification list, then we have to destroy that before the research gets over. Okay, once the research gets over. That's all about ethics and the ethical issues or the ethical principles. Any doubt? Anybody? No? So that means, oh God. That means we have completed our second chapter 2. Finished. And the one that we discussed right now, the 5 factors, the 5 aspects or the 5 ethical principles form the answer of the 12th question of page number 42. Okay. And go through these questions. For question number 9, I will be sending you a screenshot and study from that. That is a table, and that we have clear points for interview as well as questionnaire. So study from that. That would be much easier. Then how was this chapter? Chapter 2. How did you like it? Raina, how was it? Too much?
It was okay, ma'am.
It was okay. And Sana, did you understand anything?
Confusing.
Confusing, yes. I know. Even for me, it was very confusing. Grishma, are you there? Is it time? Yeah, Grishma. Yeah, how was the chapter? Chapter 2.
It was okay. Okay.
Okay, fine. Meghna,
First half was easy, then second half was confusing.
confusing. Okay. Aishwarya,
So many points to remember.
so many points to remember, so many terms to remember. That's what confuses us. So start studying from today onwards. I hope you have got the timetable. I think psychology is on October 5th. And comparing to the other subjects, I think psychology has the least portions, right? Yeah, you have almost revised all the topics. I mean, we have discussed in class also. I don't think the question paper will be too tough for you this time because this is the first time you're writing a psychology exam. So I'll try and make it good for you. But study, okay, and keep studying and reading. You can make use of the YouTube videos. They would probably help them a lot, help you a lot in understanding the concepts, especially research. And don't overdo something. That is, don't see too many of the videos and confuse the same topic, because in 5 videos they
Ma'am,
might explain in 5 years. Yes, no
ma'am,
problem.
some topics are not given in the YouTube. Some I think so cut.
Summer from what?
Some part of the textbook is not like not on YouTube.
Yeah, some part of textbook is not given in the YouTube.
No, like what you taught.
It is not given in YouTube.
Yeah.
Okay, you ask me personally. I can explain that to you.
Okay.
Okay, if you don't find it in YouTube, ask me. And yes, anything else to share?
Ma'am, what's the total marks for psychology?
50 itself. And I hope I posted the question paper pattern, right? I think so. Either in the teachers group or the other one I have posted. Yeah, that's all I think.